The Montana sun hung low over the prairie, painting the endless grass gold and amber as 8-year-old Sarah Bennett knelt in the wild meadow, her small fingers carefully picking yarrow and sage. Her calico dress, faded from too many washings, caught on the dry stems as she moved from plant to plant, filling her woven basket with anything that might ease her mother's fever. The homestead sat a mile behind her, a lonely speck against the vast wilderness. Smoke no longer rising from its chimney. She'd been gathering since dawn, her stomach empty, her lips cracked from thirst. Mama had been sick for 3 days now, burning with fever, and Papa hadn't come home from town in over a week. Sarah tried not to think about what that meant. She focused instead on remembering what Mama had taught her, the plants with healing properties, the ones that could break a fever or ease pain. Before I continue with Sarah's story, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Your support truly matters and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. I'm curious, where are you listening to this story right now? At home? During a commute? Let me know in the comments. The basket was nearly full when she heard it, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats approaching. Sarah's heart jumped into her throat. She'd been taught to hide from strangers, especially out here where the law was sparse and danger plentiful. But her legs, tired from hours of kneeling, didn't move fast enough. "Whoa there!" The voice was deep, calm. The horse, a massive bay gelding, came to a halt 20 feet away. Sarah clutched her basket to her chest, backing up a step. The rider dismounted slowly, deliberately, as if approaching a spooked animal. He was tall, taller than Papa, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin. A worn Stetson shadowed his face, but she could see dark eyes watching her with something that looked like concern. "Easy now. I'm not here to hurt you." He held up both hands, showing they were empty. "Name's Cole Wyatt. I'm the foreman at the Double R Ranch, about 10 miles west." He crouched down to her level, keeping his distance. "What's a little girl doing out here all alone, picking plants in the middle of nowhere?" Sarah's voice came out small, defensive. "I'm gathering herbs." "For medicine." Cole's eyes traveled over her, the hollow look of hunger in her face, the dirt under her fingernails, the way she trembled despite the warm afternoon. His jaw tightened. "Medicine for who, sweetheart?" "My mama. She's sick." "And your pa?" Sarah's chin wobbled, but she lifted it stubbornly. "He went to town." Cole was quiet for a long moment, reading all the things she wasn't saying. Then he asked the question that would change everything. "Do you live alone? Just you and your mama?" The tears Sarah had been holding back for 3 days finally spilled over. She nodded, unable to speak. Cole stood slowly, removed his hat, and ran a hand through dark hair. He looked toward the horizon, toward the distant homestead, then back at the little girl with her basket of desperate hope. "How long has your mama been sick?" 3 days. The fever won't break." "And you've been caring for her? By yourself?" Another nod. Cole put his hat back on, his decision made. "All right then, here's what's going to happen. You're going to ride with me back to your homestead. I'm going to look at your mama, and then I'm going to ride hard to fetch Doc Morrison from town. You understand?" "I don't have money for a doctor." "Did I ask you for money?" Cole's voice was firm but kind. "Come on now. We're burning daylight, and your mama needs real help." He lifted Sarah onto his horse like she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her, keeping her steady with one arm while he held the reins with the other. The ride back to the homestead took only minutes at a gallop, but it felt like hours to Sarah, pressed against this stranger's chest, smelling leather and wood smoke and something clean, like pine. The homestead was worse than Cole had imagined. The roof needed patching, the fence was falling down, and inside, the one-room cabin was dark and cold. Elizabeth Bennet lay on a narrow bed, barely conscious, her skin burning to the touch. Sarah hovered nearby, wringing her small hands. Cole assessed the situation with the quick efficiency of a man who'd seen hardship. He got the fire going, heated water, and used the herbs Sarah had gathered to make a compress for Elizabeth's fever. Then he turned to the little girl. "I need you to be brave a while longer. Stay with your mama. Keep these compresses cool and wet. I'm riding for the doctor, but I'll also bring back supplies, food, medicine, firewood. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded, something like hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in days. "Good girl." He paused at the door. "Your papa's not coming back, is he?" The little girl's silence was answer enough. Cole was gone before sunset, pushing his horse hard toward town. But he returned before midnight with Doc Morrison, a wagon full of supplies, and a grim determination in his eyes. The doctor worked through the night, and by dawn Elizabeth's fever had finally broken. When Elizabeth was strong enough to sit up 3 days later, Cole was still there. He'd fixed the roof, mended the fence, chopped enough wood to last through winter, and filled the pantry with supplies. He'd also sent a wire to the territorial marshal about one Martin Bennett, who'd been found dead drunk in a saloon card game gone wrong 2 towns over. "I can't pay you," Elizabeth whispered, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. "I have nothing." Cole sat in the chair by her bed, his hat in his hands. He was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Mrs. Bennet, I lost my wife and son to fever 4 years ago. I couldn't save them, but maybe." He paused, his voice rough with old grief. "Maybe I can do right by you and your daughter. I don't understand. The Double R needs a cook. The owner, Rachel Randolph, has been looking for someone to help run the main house. It comes with room and board in the foreman's cabin. 2 bedrooms, solid walls, warm stove. You'd have steady work, safety, and Sarah would be surrounded by ranch hands who'd protect her like their own." Elizabeth stared at him. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Cole met her eyes, and she saw the ghosts that haunted him. "Because nobody helped us when we needed it. Because that little girl walked miles alone to save you, and she deserves better than to watch everything fall apart. Because it's the right thing to do. I'm not strong enough yet to—" "Then we wait. I'll stay here until you are." And he did. 6 months later, Elizabeth Bennet stood in the kitchen of the Double R Ranch main house, flour on her apron and color back in her cheeks. Through the window, she could see Sarah laughing as one of the ranch hands taught her to rope a fence post. The girl had put on weight, wore new dresses, and smiled again. But it wasn't just Sarah who'd changed. Elizabeth had changed too. She'd noticed Cole Wyatt in ways a widow probably shouldn't notice a man. The way his hands, so capable with horses and hammers, could be gentle when he helped her reach something from a high shelf. The way he sat with Sarah in the evenings, teaching her to read from his own worn books. The way he looked at Elizabeth when he thought she wasn't watching, like she was something precious he was afraid to hope for. One evening in late spring, after Sarah had gone to bed in their cozy cabin, Cole knocked on the door. Elizabeth answered, wiping her hands on her apron nervously. "Mrs. Bennet, Elizabeth. He held his hat in his hands, turning it slowly. I need to speak with you about something. Her heart hammered. All right. I know it hasn't been a full year since your husband passed. I know it might not be proper, but I need you to know. He looked up at her, and the raw honesty in his dark eyes made her breath catch. I care for you, and for Sarah. Not out of duty or pity, but because you've become important to me. Both of you. Elizabeth's hands trembled. Cole, I'm not asking for an answer now. I just needed you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd be honored to court you properly, to give you and Sarah the kind of life you deserve. She stepped closer to him, her decision already made months ago, during those long winter evenings, when he'd become the steady presence their lives had always lacked. What if I'm ready now? Cole's eyes widened. Elizabeth, you saved us, not just our lives, but our hope. You showed Sarah what a good man looks like. You showed me that not all men hurt the people they're supposed to protect. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm. I'm ready. He caught her hand in his, turned his face to kiss her palm, then pulled her close. I'll spend every day proving you made the right choice. I already know I did. Their first kiss was soft, tentative, tasting of new beginnings and second chances. When they pulled apart, Cole rested his forehead against hers. Marry me. Let me be the husband you deserve and the father Sarah needs. Yes, Elizabeth whispered. 1,000 times yes. But happiness in the Wild West was never guaranteed for long. 2 months later, as preparations for a simple autumn wedding were underway, a stranger rode into the Double R. He was tall and rail-thin, with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. Elizabeth was in the main house when she heard Sarah scream. She ran outside to find Martin Bennett, alive, though she'd been told he was dead, with his hand clamped around Sarah's arm. The girl struggled, crying, as ranch hands moved in, but Martin pulled a gun. That's my daughter and my wife, he snarled. You've got no right to keep them here. Cole appeared from the barn, moving with the controlled danger of a predator. Let the girl go, Bennett. The hell I will. They're mine. I got rights. You abandoned them, left them to starve while you drank and gambled. Cole's voice was deadly calm. You got no rights to anything. I'm her father. Being a father means protecting your child, not terrorizing her. Cole moved closer, his hand near his gun. Last chance. Let her go. Martin tightened his grip on Sarah, making her whimper. You want her? Come and take her. What happened next was faster than Elizabeth could process. Cole moved, his gun clearing leather in a blur. The shot echoed across the ranch yard. Martin's gun fell from his hand as he clutched his shoulder, howling. Sarah broke free and ran to Elizabeth, who swept her up, shielding her eyes. Cole kicked Martin's gun away, his own weapon still trained on the man. Marshall's been looking for you. Turns out, you're wanted for theft and assault in 3 territories. You'll be lucky if they only hang you once. The territorial marshal arrived within the week, took one look at the situation, and declared Martin Bennett's parental rights terminated on grounds of abandonment and criminal behavior. The man was taken away in chains, still cursing. That night, Sarah crawled into bed between Elizabeth and Cole, who'd been sharing the cabin as a family, propriety be damned, and whispered, Are we safe now? Cole wrapped an arm around both of them. You're safe. Together, we're safe, and we're going to stay together. Forever? Sarah asked. Forever, Cole promised. The wedding took place in October, under golden cottonwood trees with the whole ranch in attendance. Rachel Randolph herself gave Elizabeth away, and Sarah stood as her mother's only attendant, wearing a new blue dress and wildflowers in her hair. When the traveling preacher asked if anyone objected, Sarah piped up, "I object to waiting any longer. They're already my family." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cole grinned and pulled Sarah close with one arm, while holding Elizabeth's hand with the other. "The girl has a point." The preacher, smiling, pronounced them husband and wife. That night, in their cabin, now expanded with 2 new rooms Cole had built himself, Elizabeth sat on the edge of their bed while Cole knelt to remove her shoes, a gesture of tenderness that made her throat tight. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "A good man, a safe home, a future." Cole looked up at her, his hands gentle on her ankles. "I never thought I'd want to live again after I lost them. But you and Sarah, you gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. You gave me a family again." She slid down to kneel with him, cupping his face in her hands. "Thank you for asking that question 6 months ago." "What question?" "Do you live alone?" If you hadn't stopped to ask, if you hadn't cared enough to help a desperate little girl in a field," her voice broke, "you saved us. You saved me right back." Cole kissed her softly, then deeper. "Now we save each other. Every day. Together." "Together," Elizabeth agreed. Through the thin wall they heard Sarah humming to herself as she arranged her precious collection of stones and feathers in her new room. A real room, with a real bed and curtains her mother had sewn. The sound was pure contentment, pure safety. Cole carried Elizabeth to their bed, and they loved each other slowly, gently, 2 broken people who'd found wholeness in each other's arms. Later, curled together in the darkness, Elizabeth traced the scars on his chest, old wounds from the war, from hard living, from loss. "These are part of you," she whispered, "and I love all of you. Even the broken parts? Especially the broken parts. They led you to us." 5 years later, Sarah Bennett Wyatt stood in the same meadow where she'd once gathered herbs with desperate, hungry hands. Now 15, tall and strong, she carried a basket of wildflowers for her mama's table. The Double R Ranch stretched behind her, prosperous and peaceful. She could see Cole and Elizabeth working in the garden they'd planted together, her baby brothers, twins, born 3 years ago, tumbling in the grass nearby. Cole looked up, caught her watching, and waved. Elizabeth blew her a kiss. Sarah waved back, her heart full. She remembered the little girl she'd been, terrified and alone. She remembered the cowboy who'd stopped to ask a simple question that changed everything. She remembered learning that family wasn't just about blood. It was about choosing to show up, to care, to stay. As she walked home through the golden grass, Sarah whispered to the wind, "Thank you." For the cowboy who asked if they lived alone, for the answer that brought them all together, for the love that made them whole. The summer Sarah turned 17, trouble came riding back to the Double R. It started with whispers in town, talk of a railroad company looking to buy up land for a new line cutting straight through Montana territory. Most ranchers were excited about the prospect of easier cattle transport. But Cole came home from a meeting with the railroad representatives with a face like thunder. "They want to cut right through our best grazing land," he told Elizabeth that night, his jaw tight, offered half what it's worth, and made it clear they'll use eminent domain if we don't sell. Elizabeth set down the plate she'd been drying. "Can they do that?" "They can try." Cole's hands clenched into fists. "But I won't let them take what we've built here. Not without a fight." Sarah, listening from the doorway, felt a chill despite the warm evening. She'd heard stories of what happened when big companies wanted land, families forced out, homes burned, lives destroyed. The Double R wasn't just a ranch. It was their sanctuary, their home, the place where her family had been reborn. Over the next weeks, tension mounted. Other small ranchers started selling, taking the railroad's money and moving on. But Rachel Randolph, now in her 70s but still sharp as a tack, refused. So did Cole. So did 3 other families who'd made the Double R Valley their home. Then the threats started. First, it was just words, letters promising consequences for those who stood in progress's way. Then fences were cut, cattle scattered. A barn on the neighboring ranch burned to the ground in the middle of the night. Cole doubled the watch, arming every ranch hand. He taught Sarah to shoot properly, not just tin cans, but to hit a moving target, to stay calm under pressure. Elizabeth protested at first, but Cole was firm. "I won't have her helpless if something happens," he said quietly. Not again. Sarah proved to be a natural shot, much to everyone's surprise. She had steady hands and her father's, Cole's, calm focus. By the end of summer, she could outshoot most of the ranch hands. She needed that skill sooner than anyone expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon when 5 riders came onto Double R land, armed and arrogant. Sarah was in the north pasture checking on a mare about to foal when she saw them. They didn't see her, hidden as she was in the tall grass. "Told the old lady to sell," one of them was saying. "Boss is tired of waiting. Says we make an example, the others will fold." "What kind of example?" another asked. "The kind that burns." Sarah's blood went cold. She watched them ride toward the main house, toward her mother and little brothers. Without thinking, she swung onto her horse and rode hard for the ranch, taking a shortcut through the creek bed. She burst into the yard just as the men were dismounting, shouting for Cole at the top of her lungs. Ranch hands came running. Cole appeared from the barn, his hand already on his gun. The leader of the railroad men, a thick-necked brute with cold eyes, sneered. "We've come to make Miss Randolph a final offer." "Miss Randolph isn't interested," Cole said evenly. "And you're trespassing. I suggest you leave." "Or what? You'll shoot us in front of witnesses? That's murder, cowboy." "Defending my land and family isn't murder. It's justice." The tension ratcheted up like a coiled spring. Sarah could see her mother standing in the doorway of the main house, the twins behind her. She could see Rachel Randolph emerging onto the porch, rifle in hand despite her age. "This is my land," Rachel called out, her voice still strong. "My husband built this ranch from nothing 40 years ago. He fought off claim jumpers, hostile tribes, drought, and disease. You think I'm going to hand it over to railroad thugs because you threaten me?" The leader's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, old woman. The mistake is yours, coming here with threats." Rachel raised her rifle. "Now get off my property before I decorate it with your corpses." For a moment, Sarah thought they'd actually leave. Then the leader made his move, going for his gun. Everything happened at once. Cole's shot took the man in the shoulder before he could clear leather. 2 ranch hands tackled another thug who'd drawn his weapon. Sarah found herself aiming at a third man who'd turned his gun toward her mother, her fingers steady on the trigger. "Drop it," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Drop it or I drop you." The man looked at her, really looked at this 17-year-old girl with steel in her eyes, and saw his death. He dropped his gun. The fight was over in seconds. The railroad men were disarmed, tied up, and held until the territorial marshal could be summoned. When he arrived 2 days later, He took one look at the situation and arrested all 5 men for trespassing, assault, and attempted arson. But the railroad wasn't done. A week later, a lawyer arrived with papers claiming the Double R had fraudulent deed records. Rachel's original claim, he argued, had never been properly filed. The ranch wasn't legally hers. It was a lie, but proving it meant going through territorial courts that were notoriously corrupt and slow. The railroad had money, lawyers, and judges in their pocket. Rachel had the truth, but truth didn't always win. Cole spent 3 days riding to every government office within 200 miles, searching for the original deed records. He came back empty-handed and exhausted, his frustration palpable. "They've buried the records or destroyed them," he told Rachel. "Without proof of your original claim, we might not be able to fight this in court." Rachel sat in her chair, looking every one of her 73 years. "Then we'll lose everything." "No." Elizabeth spoke up from where she'd been silent, listening. "No, we won't." Everyone turned to look at her. "When I first came here, you told me your husband had fought in the Mexican-American War, that he'd received this land as part of a veterans grant program." Rachel nodded slowly. "That's right. But the grant papers were with the deed. But military records aren't kept at the land office." Elizabeth's eyes were bright. "They're kept by the War Department. If we can prove your husband's service and his veterans grant, we can establish the original claim, regardless of what happened to the local records." Hope flickered in Rachel's face, but that would require going to the territorial capital, maybe even Washington. "Then that's where we'll go," Cole said firmly. The journey took 3 weeks. Cole and Rachel traveled by stage to Helena, then by train east. Sarah and Elizabeth managed the ranch in their absence, running operations with the help of loyal ranch hands who'd rather die than see the Double R stolen. It was the longest 3 weeks of Sarah's life. Every day, she expected more railroad thugs. Every night, she checked and rechecked the locks, kept her rifle close. She taught her little brothers to hide in the root cellar at the first sign of trouble. She patrolled the property with the hands, watching for fires, for sabotage, for violence. The railroad sent more lawyers, more threats, but no more armed men. Perhaps they'd learned their lesson. Perhaps they were waiting for the courts to do their dirty work. When Cole and Rachel finally returned, they brought with them official copies of military service records, the original veterans land grant, and a letter from a sympathetic War Department clerk who'd been appalled by the railroad's tactics. The territorial judge, faced with irrefutable federal documentation, had no choice but to rule in Rachel's favor. The Double R was safe. The celebration that night was subdued, but heartfelt. Rachel cried for the first time anyone could remember, tears of relief and exhaustion. Cole held Elizabeth close, grateful to be home. Sarah sat with her brothers, feeling older than her 17 years. Later, as the others slept, Sarah walked out to the meadow where Cole had first found her all those years ago. The stars were brilliant overhead, the prairie wind soft and warm. She knelt in the grass, ran her fingers through the wildflowers, and remembered that desperate little girl gathering herbs. She'd been so afraid then, afraid of losing her mother, of being alone, of a world that seemed determined to crush them. But Cole had asked a simple question: "Do you live alone?" And that question had led to this: a family, a home, a life worth fighting for. "Thank you," she whispered again to the night, to the land, to the cowboy who'd cared enough to stop. Behind her, footsteps approached. Cole sat down beside her in the grass, quiet for a moment. You did good these past weeks, he said finally. Taking care of things while I was gone. You're not a little girl anymore. I haven't been for a long time. No, he agreed. You grew up strong, brave. Your mama and I are proud of you. Sarah leaned against his shoulder. This man who'd been more father to her than the one who'd shared her blood. I was so scared we'd lose this place, lose our home. But we didn't, because we fought for it, together. He put his arm around her. That's what family does, Sarah. We fight for each other. We protect what matters. Together, Sarah echoed, the word that had become their family's promise. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the ranch settle into sleep below them. The future was uncertain. It always was in the Wild West. But they would face it as they'd faced everything else. Together. Sarah's 18th birthday arrived with the first snow of winter. The Double R was snug and secure, the railroad threat defeated, the land deed firmly in Rachel's name, with copies filed in 3 different government offices. But with safety came new questions, new possibilities. Sarah was no longer a child to be protected. She was a young woman with her own dreams, her own future to forge. She found herself restless, standing at crossroads she hadn't known existed. One morning, a letter arrived that would change everything. It was from a women's college in San Francisco, a progressive institution that trained young women in business, law, and medicine. One of their representatives had been through Montana territory the previous summer, had heard about the young woman who'd helped save her family's ranch from railroad corruption, and was offering Sarah a full scholarship. Elizabeth read the letter with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. Cole stood silent, his expression unreadable. "It's an opportunity," Elizabeth said softly. "The kind I never had, the kind she deserves." "It's 2,000 miles away," Cole countered, his voice rough. "I know." Sarah looked between her parents, her heart torn. Part of her wanted to leap at this chance, to learn, to grow, to see the world beyond Montana territory. But another part couldn't imagine leaving the ranch, leaving her family, leaving everything she knew. "I don't have to decide right now," she said quietly. "The letter says I have until spring." But the question hung over the family like a storm cloud. Should she stay or should she go? The answer came from an unexpected source. In January, a young Lakota man appeared at the Double R. He was tall and lean, with intelligent dark eyes and a quiet dignity that commanded respect. His name was Dakota, which meant friend to all, and he'd come seeking work. Cole was cautious at first. Tensions between settlers and native tribes were still high, despite years of treaties and broken promises. But Rachel hired Dakota on the spot, seeing something in him that reminded her of her late husband. Dakota proved to be an exceptional horseman and tracker. More than that, he was educated, taught by missionaries as a child, then self-taught through every book he could find. He spoke 3 languages fluently and could quote Shakespeare alongside tribal wisdom. He and Sarah became friends almost immediately. They talked for hours about everything: books, dreams, the unfairness of a world that judged people by their birth rather than their character. Dakota understood her restlessness. He'd felt it too, trapped between 2 worlds, belonging fully to neither. "My people say the eagle cannot soar if it never leaves the nest," he told her one evening, as they watched the sunset from the barn roof. "Your parents gave you wings, Sarah. Don't be afraid to use them." "But what if I fly away and can't find my way back?" Dakota smiled. "Eagles always know their way home, and home will always be here, waiting. It was Cole, surprisingly, who made the final decision clear. He found Sarah in the stable one February morning, brushing down her horse, clearly wrestling with her thoughts. "You're going to take that scholarship," he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah turned, startled. "I haven't decided." "Yes, you have. You've just been afraid to say it out loud." Cole leaned against the stall door. "Sarah, when I found you in that meadow 8 years ago, you were trying to save your mother's life with nothing but desperate hope and plant medicine. You've always been a fighter, always been brave. Don't stop being brave now. What if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough? Not good enough?" "Then you fail, and you get back up and you try again. That's what we taught you." Cole's voice was fierce with conviction. "I didn't save you and your mother just so you could play it safe. I saved you so you could live. Really live. And that means taking risks, chasing dreams, becoming whoever you're meant to be." "But you'll miss me." "Every single day." Cole's voice cracked. "You're my daughter, Sarah. Not by blood, but by choice. By love. And I love you enough to let you go." Sarah threw herself into his arms, crying. "I love you too, Papa. Thank you for everything. Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for asking if we were alone. Thank you for making us your family." Cole held her tight, his own eyes wet. "Best question I ever asked." Spring came with its usual burst of green, and Sarah prepared to leave for San Francisco. The entire ranch came to see her off at the stage station. Rachel, Cole, Elizabeth, her brothers, all the ranch hands, and Dakota. Elizabeth fixed Sarah's traveling cloak with trembling hands. "Write to us, every week." "I will, Mama." "And eat properly. Don't skip meals." "I won't. And if any young men get fresh with you, I'll shoot them." Sarah grinned through her tears. "You taught me well." The twins tackled her with fierce hugs. Rachel pressed the heavy purse into her hands. "For emergencies. Don't argue." And the ranch hands each gave her small tokens: a lucky horseshoe, a polished stone, a carefully carved wooden bird. Dakota gave her a book of poetry with a pressed wildflower inside. "From the meadow where you were found," he said quietly. "Remember where you came from. It will guide where you go." Finally, Cole walked her to the stage, just the two of them. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "Your whole life, every day, I'm proud of you." "Because of you," Sarah whispered. "Because you chose to care about a scared little girl in a field. Because you were worth caring about." Cole kissed her forehead. "Now go show that fancy college what Montana women are made of." Sarah climbed into the stage, stuck her head out the window for one last look at her family. Her real family. The one forged by choice and love, rather than blood and obligation. They stood together, arms around each other, waving. As the stage pulled away, Sarah touched the pressed wildflower in her book and whispered the word that had saved her life 8 years ago, the word that would guide her forward into an uncertain future. Together. Even 2,000 miles apart, they would always be together. Sarah's return to Montana wasn't just a homecoming. It was the beginning of a mission. She hung her shingle in the small town of Silver Creek, 5 miles from the Double R. Sarah Bennett Wyatt, attorney at law, land rights and family protection. The locals were skeptical at first. A woman lawyer was rare enough in San Francisco. In Montana territory, it was practically unheard of. But word spread quickly about what she'd done to save the Double R, and soon people started coming. widows whose husbands' business partners were trying to cheat them, families facing foreclosure from predatory banks, small ranchers being squeezed out by wealthy cattle barons. Sarah took them all, charging what they could afford, sometimes nothing but a hot meal and gratitude. She was good at it, better than good. She had her mother's compassion, Cole's strategic mind, and 4 years of elite legal training. She won cases that seemed impossible, found loopholes in contracts designed to be ironclad, and faced down opponents with the same steady calm she'd shown when aiming a rifle at railroad thugs. But her success made enemies. 6 months after opening her practice, Sarah was working late in her office when she heard breaking glass downstairs. She grabbed the pistol Cole had given her. "Always keep it close," he'd said, and moved quietly to the landing. 3 men were ransacking her office, throwing papers everywhere, clearly searching for something specific. She recognized one of them, Buck Morrison, hired muscle for Clayton Hartwell, the territory's most powerful cattle baron and the man she'd just defeated in court. "Looking for something, gentlemen?" Sarah called down, her gun trained on them. The men froze. Buck's hand moved toward his weapon. "I wouldn't," Sarah said coolly. "I'm an excellent shot, and Montana law is very clear about defending one's property. I'd be well within my rights to shoot all 3 of you and sleep soundly afterward." "You're making powerful enemies, Miss Lawyer," Buck growled. "Mr. Hartwell doesn't like losing." "Then Mr. Hartwell should try being on the right side of the law." Sarah cocked her pistol. "Now get out, and tell your boss that if he wants to intimidate me, he'll have to do better than sending thugs in the night." The men left, but Sarah knew this wasn't over. She sent a telegram to Cole that night, explaining the situation. His response was immediate. "Coming to town. Bringing help." Cole arrived the next morning with Dakota and 3 of the Double R's most trusted ranch hands. They moved into the rooms above Sarah's office, taking shifts, watching the street, making their presence known. The message was clear. Sarah wasn't alone. It was Dakota, with his tracker's instincts, who noticed they were being followed. A thin man in a dark coat, always keeping his distance, always watching. Not hired muscle, Dakota observed. Something else. A detective, maybe, or an assassin. Sarah felt a chill. We need to find out who he is and what he wants. The opportunity came 3 days later. Sarah left her office alone, deliberately, obviously alone, and walked toward the edge of town. She could feel the man following. When she reached an alley between 2 buildings, she ducked inside and pressed herself against the wall. The man hurried past, then stopped, confused. Before he could turn around, Dakota had a knife at his throat and Cole had a gun to his back. "Talk," Cole said quietly. "Who sent you?" The man was terrified, but defiant. "I don't know what you're talking about." Dakota pressed the blade just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. "I am Lakota. My people have many ways of making men talk. Some are not pleasant. Choose honesty." The man broke. "Hartwell, Clayton Hartwell hired me, but not to kill her, to find dirt on her. He wants something to discredit her, to get her disbarred." Sarah stepped out of the shadows. "And did you find anything?" The detective looked at her with grudging respect. "You're clean. No scandals, no secrets. Just a woman trying to do right by people who can't afford fancy lawyers." He paused. "For what it's worth, I think Hartwell's a bastard. What he's doing to those homesteaders, it ain't right." "Then help us," Sarah said impulsively. "Testify about what he hired you to do. Help me prove his pattern of intimidation and fraud. The detective, his name was Henry Welsh, stared at her. He'd kill me. Not if he's in prison. Sarah's eyes blazed with determination. I've been building a case against Hartwell for months. Witness testimony, financial records, proof of bribery and extortion. But I need someone from inside his organization. Someone who can testify about his methods. Henry was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, but you'd better win, Miss Lawyer, because if you don't, I'm a dead man. The trial of Clayton Hartwell became the biggest legal case in Montana Territory history. The Territorial Capital's courthouse was packed every day with spectators, ranchers, homesteaders, journalists from as far away as San Francisco and New York. Sarah stood before the judge, 22 years old and facing the territory's most powerful man, and she was magnificent. She presented evidence of fraudulent land deals, intimidation, violence. She called witness after witness, families Hartwell had destroyed, men he'd threatened, officials he'd bribed. Henry Welsh's testimony was devastating, detailing years of criminal activity from inside Hartwell's organization. Hartwell's lawyers were expensive and experienced, but they couldn't counter the sheer weight of evidence. More importantly, they couldn't counter Sarah's passion, her clarity, her absolute conviction that justice mattered. When she gave her closing argument, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. This case is about more than one man's crimes, she said, her voice ringing clear and strong. It's about whether the law protects the powerful or serves the people. Whether a man with money and influence can destroy lives without consequence. Whether families like mine, families who've worked and bled and sacrificed for their piece of this territory, have any rights at all. She paused, letting her words sink in. 8 years ago, my mother and I were starving and desperate. We would have lost everything if not for one man's kindness. Cole Wyatt asked us a simple question. Do you live alone? And that question changed our lives. It taught me that we're not meant to live alone, to suffer alone, to fight alone. We're meant to stand together, to protect each other, to ensure that justice isn't just for those who can afford it. Sarah looked directly at Hartwell, who met her gaze with cold fury. Clayton Hartwell thought he could operate above the law. He thought his money and power made him untouchable. But he was wrong. Because the law, real law, just law, belongs to all of us, and today it will speak. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Hartwell was sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. His assets were seized to pay restitution to his victims. His empire collapsed overnight. As Sarah left the courthouse, people crowded around her, thanking her, blessing her, pressing her hands in gratitude. Cole and Elizabeth fought through the crowd to reach her, their faces glowing with pride. "You did it," Cole said, pulling her into a fierce hug. "My God, Sarah, you did it." "We did it," Sarah corrected, including Dakota, Henry, and all the witnesses who'd found the courage to speak. Together. That night, there was a celebration at the Double R that lasted until dawn. Rachel Randolph, now nearly 80 but still sharp, raised a toast to Sarah and declared her the finest example of Montana womanhood she'd ever seen. But Sarah couldn't fully celebrate. She kept thinking about all the families who'd lost everything before she could help them. All the people still suffering under corrupt systems, waiting for someone to fight for them. Dakota found her standing alone on the porch, staring out at the dark prairie. "You can't save everyone," he said quietly. "I know, but I have to try. That's what makes you remarkable." Dakota leaned against the railing beside her. "You were given a second chance at life, and you're spending it giving other people second chances too." Sarah looked at him, really looked. Over the past months of working together, protecting her office, building the case against Hartwell, she'd come to depend on Dakota's steady presence, his wisdom, his courage, his quiet understanding of who she was and what she needed to be. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for believing in me, for protecting me, for being my friend." "Is that all I am?" Dakota asked, his dark eyes searching hers. "A friend?" Sarah's breath caught. I don't know. What else could you be?" "Whatever you need, whatever you'll allow." He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I've loved you since the first time we sat on that barn roof and talked about eagles and soaring. But I never said anything because you had dreams to chase, a future to build. I didn't want to hold you back." "You wouldn't hold me back," Sarah whispered. "You'd fly beside me." "Then let me." Dakota's voice was rough with emotion. "Let me be your partner in this mission of yours, not just in work, but in life. Let me stand with you while you change this territory, this world. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved, as an equal, as a warrior, as the extraordinary woman you are." Sarah's answer was to kiss him, there on the porch, under the Montana stars, with her family's celebration echoing behind them, and her future spreading out like the endless prairie before them. When they finally pulled apart, Dakota rested his forehead against hers. "Your father is going to shoot me," he said with a hint of humor. Sarah laughed. "Cole adores you. He's been hoping we'd figure this out for years. And if people have problems with you marrying a Lakota man, then they can take it up with my lawyer." Sarah's eyes sparkled. "Oh wait, that's me. And I'm very good at my job." Sarah and Dakota's wedding was held in the meadow where Cole had first found her, the place where her second life had begun, where everything had changed because a cowboy had cared enough to stop and ask if she lived alone. It was a blend of cultures and traditions. A tribal elder performed Lakota blessing rites, while a circuit preacher spoke Christian vows. Sarah wore both a white dress and traditional native beadwork. Dakota stood proud in buckskin and silver, his long hair decorated with eagle feathers, earned through courage and honor. Cole walked Sarah down an aisle of wildflowers, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered face. Elizabeth sobbed into her handkerchief. The twins, now 12 years old, served as witnesses with solemn importance. Rachel Randolph presided over everything like a benevolent queen. When the ceremony ended, and Sarah and Dakota were pronounced husband and wife, the celebration that followed brought together people from every walk of Montana life: ranchers and tribal members, townfolk and homesteaders, people Sarah had helped, and people who simply believed in what she represented. As the sun set and the dancing began, Cole found Sarah for a quiet moment. "Your father would be proud," he said. Then he corrected himself. "Your birth father, I mean, wherever he is." Sarah took his hand. "You're my father, Cole, in every way that matters. And I know you're proud because I am who I am because of you. Because you stopped that day. Because you asked that question. Do you live alone?" Cole repeated the words that had changed everything. "Best question I ever asked. Best answer I ever gave was letting you into our lives. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the celebration. Dakota was dancing with Elizabeth, making her laugh. The twins were teaching Rachel Randolph's great-nephew how to do a proper do-si-do. The whole scene was chaotic and joyful and perfect. "I have something for you," Cole said, pulling a small leather pouch from his pocket. "Wedding present, from me and Elizabeth." Sarah opened it and gasped. Inside was a deed to 50 acres of prime land adjoining the Double R. "We're not getting any younger," Cole said gruffly. "Figured you and Dakota might want to build something of your own. Still be close to family, but have your own place, your own future." "Cole, this is too much. It's exactly enough. You're my daughter, Sarah. Everything I have, everything I am, I'd give it all to you 1,000 times over." He pulled her into a hug. "Build something beautiful, build a life, build a family, and know that we'll always be here, cheering you on." 5 years after her wedding, Sarah stood in front of the Montana Territorial Legislature, addressing a room full of skeptical male lawmakers. She was there to advocate for a new law, one that would protect homesteaders' rights, prevent the kind of land theft that had nearly destroyed the Double R, and establish legal aid programs for families who couldn't afford lawyers. Her belly was round with her second child. Her daughter, Hope, was 3 years old and currently being spoiled by her grandmother, Elizabeth, back at the ranch. But pregnancy didn't slow Sarah down. If anything, it made her more fierce, more determined to build a world where her children would be safe, where families would be protected, where justice would be accessible to all. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, "I stand before you as living proof of what this territory can be." 13 years ago, I was a desperate child gathering herbs to save my dying mother. We had nothing, no money, no protection, no hope. We should have died alone and forgotten. She paused, letting them absorb this. But a good man stopped and asked if we lived alone. That question, that moment of compassion, saved our lives. It led to everything I've become. A lawyer, a wife, a mother, an advocate. It taught me that we are not meant to live alone, to suffer alone, to be crushed by systems that don't care about human dignity. Sarah placed both hands on her belly, feeling her unborn child kick. "The law I'm proposing today is that question, codified. It says, you are not alone. The territory of Montana stands with you. We will protect your land, your rights, your family. We will ensure that justice is not a luxury for the wealthy, but a guarantee for all. This law says that what happened to my family, the kindness, the second chance, the opportunity to build something beautiful from desperation, should be available to everyone." The room was silent. Sarah could see some lawmakers moved, others skeptical, still others calculating political costs. "Pass this law," Sarah said quietly, "and you will be remembered as the legislature that chose humanity over profit, families over corporations, justice over convenience. Reject it, and you will be remembered as the men who had the chance to change everything and chose not to care." She gathered her papers and walked out, leaving them to deliberate. 3 hours later, the law passed by a narrow margin. Sarah was standing on the Capitol steps, breathing in the cool mountain air, when a telegraph messenger found her. The telegram was from Cole. "We are so proud. Stop. Come home. Stop. Your family loves you. Stop." Sarah pressed the telegram to her heart and smiled through her tears. Home, family, love. All because a cowboy had once asked, "Do you live alone?" And the answer had been, "Not anymore. Never again." 20 years after Cole Wyatt found a desperate little girl in a meadow, Sarah Bennett Wyatt sat on the porch of her law office, now a thriving practice with 3 associate attorneys, and watched the sunset over Silver Creek. She was 41 years old now, a mother of 4, a grandmother once over. The twins had both married and started families, and one of the most respected legal minds in Montana, which had recently achieved statehood. The meadow where Cole had found her was now a protected landmark, preserved by state law, as a reminder of where one family's second chance had begun and blossomed into something that changed an entire territory. Cole was 70 now, silver-haired but still strong, still spending every day working the land he loved. Elizabeth was 65, still cooking for the Double R, still the heart of their family. Rachel Randolph had passed peacefully in her sleep 2 years ago, but her legacy lived on in every acre of the ranch, every family it supported, every life it touched. Sarah's own children were growing. Hope was 17 now, smart and fierce and determined to be a doctor. Her son Justice was 15 and wanted to be a veterinarian. The younger two, Freedom, 12, and Mercy, 9, were still deciding who they wanted to become. Dakota joined her on the porch, handing her a cup of coffee just the way she liked it. He was gray at the temples now, laugh lines deep around his eyes, but still the steady presence she'd fallen in love with. "Thinking about the past?" he asked, settling beside her. "Thinking about how lucky I was, how everything could have gone differently." Sarah leaned against him. If Cole hadn't stopped that day, if he hadn't cared, if he hadn't asked that one question, but he did, Dakota said simply. "And you took the second chance he offered and built something extraordinary with it." Sarah looked out at the town she'd helped build, at the families walking past, families she'd helped save, protect, defend. She thought about the laws she'd helped pass, the lives she'd changed, the ripple effect of one act of kindness that had spread across a territory and beyond. "I want to write it down," she said suddenly, "the whole story. From that day in the meadow to now. I want my grandchildren to know where they came from, what it means to ask if someone lives alone, what it means to stand together." "Then write it," Dakota encouraged. "Tell the truth. Let them understand that every family has a beginning, and sometimes that beginning is one person caring enough to stop and offer hope." That night, Sarah began writing. She wrote about a little girl gathering herbs, about a cowboy who stopped, about a question that changed everything. She wrote about building a family from broken pieces, about fighting for what mattered, about love that transcended blood and culture and circumstance. She wrote until her hand cramped and her eyes grew heavy. And when she finally set down her pen, she whispered the same words she'd whispered in that meadow 20 years ago. "Thank you for the question that saved her life, for the family that made her whole, for the opportunity to spend her days making sure no one had to live alone, suffer alone, or face injustice alone, for everything that came from one moment of compassion, one choice to care, one question that opened the door to a future full of hope. Do you live alone? No, never again. Not as long as there were people willing to ask the question and stand together with the answer." Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Sarah Elizabeth, and Cole's journey. Your feedback means the world to us.